when this hidden camera recorded what her husband was doing with her dog. Alice's hands trembled as she pressed play on the hidden camera footage. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of fear and anger twisting in her stomach. She had spent years building a life with Tom, trusting him with not just her home, but her most beloved companion, Lucky. But as the video began, nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to witness. The screen flickered, showing their cozy living room. Lucky sat quietly in his usual spot near the couch, his little ears perked up. Then, Tom entered the frame. At first, he simply walked past the dog, but then, without warning, he turned back, his expression darkening. Alice watched in horror as Tom lunged at Lucky, grabbing him roughly by the scruff of his neck. The poor dog yelped, his tiny body trembling in fear. Tears welled in Alice's eyes as she saw her husband shove Lucky to the floor. The dog scrambled to escape, his nails scratching desperately against the hardwood, but Tom wasn't done. He kicked over Lucky's food bowl, sending kibble flying across the room. Then, with an expression that was disturbingly cold, he muttered something under his breath before delivering a sharp, cruel slap to the terrified animal's head. Alice's breath hitched. How could this be happening? This was the man she had loved, trusted. How could he treat an innocent creature like this? Lucky cowered in the corner, his small frame shaking violently. The video continued, showing more than just physical abuse. Tom tormented Lucky in ways Alice hadn't even considered, blasting loud music to scare him, yanking away his toys, and even locking him in the bathroom for hours at a time. Every action was calculated, deliberate, and utterly inexcusable. Alice's blood boiled. She couldn't sit still anymore. With fury burning through her veins, she grabbed her phone and dialed the police. Then she packed a bag, scooped up Lucky in her arms, and left. By the time Tom returned home that night, the house was empty except for the police officers waiting for him at the door. Alice never looked back. She filed for divorce the next day, determined to start fresh with Lucky, far away from the man she once thought she knew. And as for Tom, he would soon learn that actions have consequences. Lucky, once scared and broken, finally found safety, wrapped in the arms of the one person who truly loved him. And for Alice, she discovered something even more powerful: her own strength. As Alice drove away from the house that once held so many memories, she glanced down at Lucky, curled up on the passenger seat. His little body still trembled, but when he looked up at her, there was something else in his eyes: hope. She reached over and gently stroked his head, whispering, "It's over now, baby, you're safe, I promise." Alice knew she couldn't just leave it at filing for divorce. Tom needed to face justice. The video footage was undeniable proof of his cruelty, and she wasn't going to let him walk away from it. She handed the recordings over to the police, and within days, the authorities charged Tom with animal abuse. The story spread quickly, news outlets picked it up, and soon, people all over the city were condemning his actions, but karma wasn't done with Tom yet. As the case gained attention, Tom lost more than just his wife. He lost his job, his friends, and his reputation. The man who had once walked with arrogance now found himself alone, shunned by society. Alice, on the other hand, found herself surrounded by support. Strangers reached out, offering kind words, and an animal rescue organization even offered to help Lucky recover from his trauma. But the most unexpected turn came when she met Ryan, a kind-hearted veterinarian who had been following her story. He volunteered to check on Lucky, making sure the little dog was healing not just physically, but emotionally, too. One visit turned into two, then into long conversations, coffee dates, and laughter that Alice hadn't felt in years. As months passed, Lucky transformed. His once fearful eyes sparkled with joy again. He ran freely in the park, his tail wagging as he played with other dogs. And Alice, she too, found her freedom. One evening, as the sun set in shades of gold and crimson, Ryan reached for her hand. "You saved Lucky," he said softly, "but I think he saved you too." Alice smiled, squeezing his hand. Yeah, she whispered, watching Lucky chase fireflies in the grass. I think he did. And for the first time in a long time, Alice felt something she thought she had lost forever: peace. As the weeks turned into months, Alice found herself settling into a new routine, one that no longer revolved around fear, uncertainty, or walking on eggshells. She had moved into a charming little apartment on the outskirts of the city, a place filled with warmth, sunlight, and most importantly, love. Lucky had made a full recovery. The once terrified little French bulldog now wagged his tail freely, greeting everyone he met with joy instead of fear. His playful spirit returned, and Alice knew deep down that she had made the right decision. But just when she thought the past was fully behind her, Tom found a way to slither back into her life. One evening, Alice was walking Lucky in the park when her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something in her gut told her to answer. The moment she heard the voice on the other end, her blood ran cold. Alice, Tom. She gripped the phone tightly, her heart pounding. She hadn't spoken to him since the divorce was finalized. He had been convicted of animal cruelty and sentenced to community service along with hefty fines. She thought that was the end of it. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions brewing inside her. There was a pause before he spoke. "I made a mistake," he said. "I miss you." Alice felt a rush of anger and disgust. After everything he had done to her, to Lucky he had the audacity to think she'd take him back. "You don't miss me," she snapped. "You just miss having someone to control." "You don't understand." "No, Tom, you don't understand. I saw who you really are, and I'll never let you hurt me or Lucky again." She hung up before he could say another word. Her hands shook, but when she looked down, she saw Lucky staring up at her with those big, round eyes, full of trust. She took a deep breath and smiled. "Let's go home, buddy." And that's exactly what they did, leaving the past behind, stepping forward into a future where love, peace, and second chances waited. Tom had been nothing more than a dark chapter in her story. But Alice, she was finally writing her own ending. Days passed, then weeks, and Alice thought she had finally closed the door on Tom for good. But some doors don't stay shut so easily. One evening, as she returned home from work, a strange feeling settled in her gut, a sense that something wasn't right. She fumbled with her keys, unlocking the door to her apartment. Lucky, who usually greeted her with excited barks and wagging tails, was nowhere to be seen. Her heart pounded. "Lucky," she called, stepping inside. The apartment was silent to silent. Then, from the corner of the room, she heard a soft whimper. She rushed toward the sound and found Lucky hiding under the couch, shaking. His tiny body was curled up in fear, his ears pinned back. Alice knelt beside him, her breath catching in her throat. Something was wrong. That's when she saw it, a single red rose placed neatly on her coffee table. Her blood turned to ice. Tom. The realization hit her like a freight train. He had been inside her apartment. Her mind raced. The locks, she had changed them. The security system, she had installed one, but still, he had found a way in. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands and dialed the police. "My ex-husband broke into my home." The operator's voice was calm but urgent. "Are you in a safe place?" Alice looked down at Lucky, who was still trembling. No, she thought, not yet. The hunt begins. Within minutes, police officers arrived, sweeping the apartment for any signs of forced entry. There was none. Tom hadn't broken in, he had a key. But how? Alice's stomach churned as she realized the awful truth. Tom must have made a copy of her key before the divorce. He had planned this. The officers took the rose as evidence, along with the security footage from the hallway cameras. And that's when they saw him, Tom, standing outside her door, waiting, watching. He had been there for hours. One officer turned to Alice, his expression grim. "We'll find him, but you need to be careful. Men like him, they don't just walk away." That night, Alice didn't sleep. Neither did Lucky. A dangerous game. The next morning, Alice packed a bag. She wasn't going to sit around and wait for Tom to strike again. She needed a plan. She called Ryan, the veterinarian she had been seeing, and told him everything. Without hesitation, he offered her a safe place to stay. "Come to my cabin," he said. "It's outside the city, secluded. He won't find you there." Alice didn't need to think twice. She grabbed Lucky, got in her car, and drove. But as she merged onto the highway, her rearview mirror caught something that made her blood run cold. A black SUV following her. Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Tom, he had found her, the final confrontation. Alice's heart pounded as she pressed her foot on the gas, weaving through traffic. The SUV stayed right behind her, relentless. She couldn't lead him to Ryan's cabin. She had to end this tonight. A sudden idea struck her: the police station. She made a sharp turn, heading straight for the nearest precinct. The SUV followed until he realized where she was going. As the bright red and blue lights of the station came into view, the SUV swerved violently, tires screeching against the pavement. Tom made a desperate U-turn and sped away, but it was too late. Alice had already called the police. By the time she parked in front of the station, an officer was already waiting. "We'll get him," he promised. This time, he won't escape, and he was right. Tom was arrested later that night, found lurking near Alice's old apartment, waiting, but Alice wasn't afraid anymore. Because this time, she had a new beginning. A month later, Alice and Lucky sat on the porch of Ryan's cabin, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt safe. Lucky lay beside her, his little body relaxed, his breathing steady. Ryan came out, handing her a cup of tea. "How does it feel?" he asked. Alice smiled, looking out at the endless stretch of trees, the open sky, and the quiet, peaceful world she had built for herself. "It feels like freedom," and with Lucky by her side and a future full of possibilities ahead, she knew this was only the beginning.